Hey everybody, welcome to a almost Halloween edition of the Voxology podcast. This, as many of our listeners will know, is Tim Stafford's favorite time of the year.
That's correct.
It is when the sky is turning darker, the weather is getting cooler,
Amen.
and all of the Jesus-centered alternatives to Halloween are being promoted. I have participated.
If that works for you.
Well, I've participated personally in multiple hullabaloos, fall festivals, harvest festivals, and then at our church we have something called Trunk or Treat.
Yeah.
So, which I thought, could sound inappropriate until I realized that we were talking about cars, and so then I realized, and it's cool. We do it with this ministry that partners with kids with special needs and their families.
Nice.
And so it just turns out to be a really cool thing. Although, we could call it Halloween, but
I was glad my parents allowed, we would go do the church thing, whatever the church, I can't remember what they called it when we were kids. And then, but they would still let us go trick-or-treating.
Yeah.
And so it was we had to go do it was I didn't enjoy it, at least. I'm sure lots of kids loved the church event one, but
yeah,
I wanted to be there's something, it's not, it's not the spooky. It's like being out with your friends and you're in these costumes and it's nighttime and it's just it's a whole thing.
There was a part in the first season of Stranger Things where the four boys were trick-or-treating. Yeah. And it felt, that was the moment, I was like, that's my childhood right there.
Yes. Yep.
There aren't many parents around. Kids are just roaming all over the place.
I can still feel what that feels like. There's a feeling in your body being out at night like that when you're young. And
Oh yeah, dude. It's a whole different world, man. And So all that is to say, we celebrate, for those of you that celebrate Halloween, Tim Stafford joins you. For those of you that celebrate a Jesus-centered alternative, I join you. For those of you that celebrate Reformation Day, no one joins you, at least from the Voxology podcast. So
we had band practice last night for playing in a cemetery next weekend.
Oh, no, rewind. What?
I'm playing in a cemetery in Auburn.
Of course.
And there's
this is so perfect.
Screening the movie Coco afterwards. And there's some traditional Aztec dancers coming out, and this whole thing.
Okay, what band? Are you putting this together, or someone else?
The theater. So our friend Brandon is on the board of the theater.
That explains it
all together. I had this idea once that I wanted to have a band that just played Misfits and Cramps, just kind of punky, spooky, punky things, and only plays once a year. Just shows up and plays, and then doesn't come out for the rest of the year. And then I was talking to him about it. I was like, I think it would be fun. Yeah. And then he texted me a week later. He's like, I just booked you. And I was like, what do you mean? And so now we're doing it, but we're not doing the punky because it's more of a kid thing. So we're playing all these kind of spooky songs with the little kids choir. And,
that sounds really fun.
Yeah. I think it'll be a blast.
That's awesome. We did
it's called Prairie Ghost and the Spooky Kids.
Bro,
I made pins. I'll send you one.
Of course you did. I'm in, dude. I'm in for Prairie Ghost merch. I can tell you right now. We had a Good Friday service in a cemetery once, and that was really kind of incredible. As you're reflecting,
everyone was going to rise while you're in there.
The rapture can happen at any time, bro. Any freaking time. And we did it at sundown, so we were still safe. But yeah, I think the more we could do in cemeteries, the better. I think that's what a incredible. That Good Friday was one of the most powerful ever for me, because you're this is the last great enemy of the human race. Right here.
Yeah.
So anyway, can someone take some video and can we put it up on Instagram or something? Because I want to see some of this.
Yeah.
Probably. Is there what? Are we talking like 60s Halloween anthems? I don't even know.
Well,
the
3 or
Monster
4
Mash?
of the songs are from the Halloween record that I put out last year.
Yes.
And then we're doing a couple of Ryan Gosling's, Dead Man's Bones. We're doing a couple of those songs. And
nice. Yeah, let's plug your Halloween album.
That's right.
It's on Spotify.
It's all over the place.
Where
it's
is
on
it?
all of them. It's on all the streamers.
And what's it called?
It's just called Halloween.
I mean,
Keep it simple.
If you're going to be satanic, it's best to just be straightforward.
Just be clear.
Yeah. Yes. Tim Stafford worships demons.
There's the pull quote for the episode.
All right, that's fun. I mean, besides everything falling apart in the world, how was your week? Did you have therapy this week?
No, we had it last week.
Okay.
We have it every other week.
Which is about all we can handle.
I know. Well, I don't know. What we've talked about, I'm really enjoying therapy, which sounds funny, but it's just been, I'm such a cheerleader for people being in therapy. It's been wonderful.
Yeah.
She has a gift that, unless you have really sat and let somebody who knows what they're doing kind of pick things apart for you.
Mm-hmm.
I think I grew up with the kind of the superstition or whatever. The therapy was like, you don't need that. People don't need it. I don't need it.
No, we have
once
Christ.
I got into it, I was like, oh crap. I really need it.
Yeah.
You need it. You need it. You need it. You need it. You need it.
That's the hardest thing is once you go and see the value in it, it's hard not to just look at everybody else and go, you guys really should be doing this.
Yeah.
I totally
really
agree.
Healthy.
I totally agree. Yep.
And you don't need crazy trauma for it to be beneficial. You could just be a human being and it's good for you.
But for those of us that do have
it's
some things we're working through, holy moly. It is, fun isn't the right word, but the process, I mean, if you go
trust the process.
Yes, that's it, man. If you go there, it is just ridiculous. All right, let me tell you. I mean, I don't have a lot to banter about, which will be good news to the non-banter folks.
I know we got a few emails last time after we were like, sorry about this. They're like, actually, I really enjoy and appreciate it.
There are some pro banter folks. So good. We one of the things we also want to let you know about is on Patreon. I'm so behind on like honoring the people that are like joining the team. We usually give them shout outs and I'm just way behind on it, but we've started doing Q&As with Gombas for our Patreon page. And it's really been fun. It's
the cues coming from
the patrons and the A's coming from the two of us and Gombas, even though they're questions for Gombas. We can't help ourselves. And so anyway, if that's at all interesting to you, I don't know.
It's available to all Patreon
tiers. That's right.
Anyone that's involved.
That's right. Although, I mean, I'm open to advertising. Do you have low T?
Low TG?
Me too.
We do. It's on our Patreon page.
All right. So how many episodes is this on Revelation right now? Like, do we know?
22, I think.
Okay. All right. We're wrapping. We're kind of getting, we're accelerating.
Say what?
Yeah. We're accelerating. We got to be thinking about what we're going to do next. But the feedback on this from you all has been really, really fun. And I can't tell you how incredibly rewarding it is to hear that this has been helpful for several of you. It was completely liberating for me. And even and especially in times like these where, I mean, I can't tell you how many preacher clips I got over, on my For You Instagram feed that were all, here's what's happening in Israel. Like there was a guy this morning that was saying, if Satan wins against Israel, God will be defeated. Whoa. And that's why Satan will not win against Israel. And it was like, okay,
it's a hot take.
That is steaming.
Yeah. Wow.
So
something.
So yeah, exactly. So like what you actually think about what God is like and how God works in the world and where God is aiming this whole project. actually really matters when it comes to times and seasons, like this. And it's super easy for me, and many of us to kind of throw out the theory and go, wow, this is like, these are big global events, and maybe there is a giant conspiracy, or I don't know. We just want to keep pressing on into the idea that regardless of if it was in 1500 or 1700 or 2000 or 2023, Revelation speaks and is a prophetic book, and it's misunderstood because it comes to us in an apocalyptic form. And it comes to us addressed to 7 real churches that would have understood the signs and symbols in the book. They wouldn't have needed our geographical, 21st century geographical maps of nation states to make sense of the book.
I just keep thinking today when I went out, went and worked at the coffee shop this morning, and I just couldn't stop thinking about this idea of like powers and principalities as agents of chaos, and then looking at the world and just seeing chaos, like entities that aren't trying to win like a prize, just trying to disrupt and confuse, and you can just see it. You can just see agents of chaos causing chaos over, whether it's over centuries or in the moment. Like, you can see these tendrils that kind of
totally
intertwine and just are causing humans to just not trust one another and instead try to harm and take. And it's just, it's pretty crazy.
It actually is. And this is when our Jesus following is supposed to matter most, is when it's not making sense, and when it's scary, and when it's, if we can be purveyors of non-cliched hope, of lament and hope.
Well, that's the Easter that I stole from you this Easter when I taught this last Easter, that whole thing with the He is risen. And I've been thinking about that these last couple of weeks too, of just to give context, you taught on Easter, and then I stole it from you of like, this was the he is risen indeed became like a rallying cry for folks, where it was like in the face of hopelessness, sometimes when they didn't know what was happening or didn't know why things were, the way they were, or it seemed like God was not there, they would remind each other, he is risen indeed. And so I've thought about that in the midst of this chaos too, like just those of us like banding together and just saying like, this is terrible, and this sucks, and this is heavy, and I don't get it, and where is God? And taking that breath and saying he is risen, then leaning into hope and trying to be peacemakers.
That's
really
man.
Interesting.
Well, it's really hard, because the biblical hope, it's funny. Paul writes in Romans, the biblical hope does not disappoint, but it sure feels like it does. And biblical hope comes through disappointment and suffering, not around it, And so, we're not talking about purveyors of, hey, it's going to be okay in the end. That's not biblical hope. Biblical hope is grounded in lament. The reason we can lament is because this is going somewhere. We're not shouting into the air or into the vacuum. This is going somewhere. And so lament becomes this expression of hope that, the most powerful expression of lament. So we were 2015 or 14, my wife and I and loads of others were in Israel, and they have this, and I don't remember the specifics, so I may get the details wrong, but it was I think it was called Remembrance Day. And I don't remember if it was regarding some past trauma. But it was the day where no matter at a certain time, all of Israel stood still for 2 minutes. And I don't know if that was Holocaust or if it was, I should know this and I don't remember. But like, we were walking through a market, and then everybody just stops and you stand still, and it's just silent for 2 minutes. And then we went to this, I don't know, I guess it was a hotel. Like, we were at a touristy hotel, and we were hanging out at the bar later that day. And somebody got up and they sang in Hebrew David's lament for Jonathan out of, and it was the most mournful, grievous, hopeful thing I've ever experienced, in my entire life. And I was like, that's what we're talking about. And I just never learned how to do that as an American Christian. There's just nothing in my tradition that says, hey, it's okay if it doesn't end in a pretty red bow, or if the pretty red bow turns out to be way more complicated and nuanced than,
Yeah, which is usually the case.
Yeah, totally. So I've been, sitting in this place of how do we be purveyors of non-cliched hope?
Yeah.
And I actually don't know. So I'm not saying anything, it's just not that the world needs any more hot takes on this whole thing. But it does, when I engage Revelation, it actually speaks to that in ways that aren't, hey, here's the formula and the calendar, and that we have hope because, we're watching the countdown. Right. That almost seems like voyeuristic hope. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, I'm loving watching other people suffer so that I get to go to heaven sooner. The Revelation pushes me into these spaces of these are the same cycles that have replayed themselves over and over and over and over and over throughout the course of human history. And the word that the Bible uses to describe the failed human project is the word sin. It has missed. The failed human project of caring for each other, stewarding creation, imaging God into the world and to each other, that has failed. That has missed.
Dude, I was thinking about that this morning with the last episode we were talking about is decreation.
Yes.
So I was talking to a student about they have to write argument essays. So we were going through all these different argument, and one of them we were talking about the environment, and all of a sudden just my head started spinning out on how the Earth is pretty big, and it's this giant rock and this ecosystem that's floating in space, and we have the power to actually destroy it.
Yeah,
that's what a wild
Well, think about extinction. When animals go extinct, we're actually decreating. We're moving backwards in the Genesis story. You know what I mean? And
I told you that one time. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was teaching in Mexico on one of those Mexico missions trips when I was, 19 or something like that. And I was preaching on something in Genesis, and I was just saying I was talking about creation stuff, and I was like, hey, just as a weird it's kind of weird that you don't see humans eating meat until the fall. You see that we steward over the animals and we give them names, but we mostly are eating of the trees of the trees and the plants and that kind of stuff. And I was like, what if, we were talking about different ways in which sin chain. I was like, I'm not saying this is fact. I just thought this was an interesting observation. And right when I said that, a herd of cows walked by where we were, and they all stopped and started mooing. And it was this crazy, weird,
see, it's like, see, Stafford. And they were all shouting at you, eat more chicken.
That's right. Exactly.
Oh, I love it. So yeah, Revelation has great explanatory power, and that's why it speaks to situations, but it doesn't have calendarizing power or predictive.
That's not the point.
No, not at all. So we're going to start a meandering road today that's going to end with the dragon and the beast. And we won't get there today, but in honor of Halloween, Tim's favorite holiday. And when I told him, I'm like, hey, I think we'll do dragon and beast. He's like, dude, it's perfect. Halloween, let's go.
Easy.
Yeah. But so we're going to meet, and just as a reminder, hopefully, I don't know how much anyone remembers of what we say in previous episodes. It's like church, right? I will do sermon series, but you're preaching to a parade. It's new people who have no clue what you just said, and you know what I mean? And it's awesome, because why should anybody, why are my words so important that anyone should be thinking about them later? Don't know. But just as a brief reminder, we've cobbled together a way of seeing patterns in these repeated instances of the day of the Lord that kind of happen at the end of every 7 judgment cycle. Yeah. And so, what we're suggesting is to read this linearly and literally and chronologically would be to really to flatten the text into something that is not at all what it's meant to, convey. And so because it's the intersection of an epistle and prophecy and apocalyptic literature, we are just reminded that what we're grounding this whole thing is on the following assumptions. Number one, because it's prophetic, it has immediate relevance to its contemporary situation. Because it's an epistle, the original audience would have understood it. And because it's apocalyptic, it's in dialogue with other symbolic traditions, namely the Old Testament and the propaganda of the Roman Empire. And in that mess, so when we encounter signs and symbols in Revelation, our first instinct is to go backwards into the Hebrew Bible, or it should be, to say, hey, is this picking up on something that has happened before? And most often the answer is absolutely and utterly. And then there are details that are thrown into these symbolic visions that don't have Old Testament resonance, but you find out are direct pulls from Roman imperial culture. Yeah. And so as we're letting Revelation sort of read us, we have to unlearn a whole bunch of things so that we'll read it right. So before we get to the dragon, I want to start all the way back in Genesis with the talking snake. Because there's a motif that's introduced there that's going to play in Revelation. Same with the beast. The beast, as we'll see maybe next episode or two, I don't know. The beast is not a human figure. The beast, you would never have encountered a beast from the sea thinking that this is a human person. That comes from a very symbolic picture of what's happening in Daniel. And so we're going to get to Revelation, but we're going to take a couple of steps back to sort of build and enflesh a picture that gets us to Revelation, so that when we get there, hopefully we have a little more awareness of what the text is saying and not saying. Because, the minute we get into dragons and beasts, we get into Antichrist, which is not mentioned, in the book, and all of those sorts of things, and one world governments, and all sorts of details. So, just as a reminder, we encounter the risen Christ, and in Revelation 1, John tells us what the book is and what the book is for, and then we encounter the risen Christ walking among his churches. And the symbolic pictures of the risen Christ there are all borrowed from previous prophetic pictures in Daniel, Ezekiel, Isaiah, and other places. And they're referred to throughout the rest of the book. This risen Jesus encounters 7 symbolically, but so there are more than 7, but that's the representative number of fullness. 7 flesh and blood churches in Asia Minor at the end of the first century. And he addresses them as an emperor would address cities in the emperor's jurisdiction. He commends them, he challenges them, he promises rewards for them. And, we looked at length about the issues of faithfulness and allegiance that the early churches were dealing with. Jesus, we then get, the book then pivots into a heavenly vision, because the churches have been invited to overcome, and we don't know what it means for the churches to be victorious until we get to a throne room scene where we meet one who sits upon the throne in a parody of Roman imperial worship. The one who sits on the throne is at the center of the universe. And then the one who sits on the throne is joined by a lamb that is called a lion. But when we look, we see a lamb that was slain. And that image is the image of victory. That's how the churches are going to overcome. And in the hand of the one who sits on the throne, there is a scroll. And a scroll is an Old Testament image for the unfolding of history. And so the only one that has authority to unfold history is the lamb that was slain. And so we begin to open up seals, and we're introduced to the day of the Lord, where God comes against civilizations and empires that oppress his people. And this has happened multiple times. Israel had to undergo a day of the Lord. Egypt underwent a day of the Lord. Babylon underwent a day of the Lord. Rome is going to undergo a day of the Lord. That's the big promise to the churches. And all of these many days of the Lord point to an ultimate or final day of the Lord that we're going to read about, in chapter 17 through 19, where, oh my goodness, here comes Jesus with a sword. It's about time he's going to kick everyone's butt. The army of God is with him, but they're all dipped in blood before the battle, and it's the blood of Christ, right? I mean, and you're like, oh, okay, this is a really different form of conquering than anything we've ever. That's the big revelation of the whole book, is that Jesus is victorious by suffering. So we begin in chapter 6 to get into these judgment cycles, and they all have certain elements. They have an interlude, they have earthquakes, and they kind of end in this poetic sort of refrain about earthquakes and lightning and thunder and so on. We looked at all of this. Chapter 6 ends, and I hope this is helpful. Chapter 6 ends with the question, well, who can stand when the day of the Lord comes? Well, and then chapter 7, we instantly meet people who are standing before the throne. And they're represented to us in two ways. The first way, we hear about a census, a military census, taken of 144,000 people, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, and they are sealed with a signet ring. But then the writer looks and he sees a great multitude from every tongue, tribe, and nation. And that these are the people standing before the Lord. And what they all have in common is that they're wearing white robes and they've all been dipped in the blood of the Lamb. In other words, they've shared in the faithful witness of Jesus unto death. Then, and they worship. At that point, in chapter 8, we get the seventh seal, which is the introduction of the trumpets. Another day of the Lord motif. The trumpets are like the plagues of Egypt. And we're told in the middle of them that no one's repenting. Just like Pharaoh didn't repent, like we're replaying the Exodus motif.
Yeah.
And so that we don't repent. But then this whole thing is interrupted when the scroll is opened in chapter 10. And all of a sudden, John is told, take and eat this, which means internalize the contents and prophesy it to the nations. And the scroll has two images. One image of a temple that we argued, or at least think, that it's a picture of the entire people of God being measured. And then two witnesses that turn out to be lampstands placed in the Gentile regions of the temple, and they witness to the reality of Jesus and his lordship, and they undergo what Jesus underwent, which was crucifixion and resurrection after 3 days. And so the churches, these aren't just two people, this is in reference to the prophetic witness of the church. This prophetic witness is at risk because when it is birthed, when Jesus comes into the world in chapter 12, we meet a great red dragon. And the dragon is trying to gobble up a baby that is being born. The baby flees into the desert. And then there is a great war, not only in the heavens, but there is a great war now on earth where the dragon goes after the followers of the Lamb. And this is another apocalyptic image describing, right, that sitting behind the Roman Empire is this evil that has opposed Jesus from the very beginning.
Right.
And since Jesus, defeated this power, the power now wars against the followers of Jesus. But they defeat the dragon the same way that Jesus did, by, the word of their testimony and their willingness to be martyred unto death. And then in 13, we then meet two beasts that introduce and represent the work of the dragon in the world. So to understand 12 and 13, I want to go back into Genesis just for the rest of this episode. And I want to talk about spiritual beings. We did a conversation on this, I don't know how long ago. Gombus has some great stuff on this in his Ephesians stuff. Tim Mackey has some, the Bible Project did a whole thing on spiritual beings, I think, like a series of podcasts. Michael Heiser is a guy who Tim loves to reference, and who wrote, I don't remember the name of the book. I think it had supernatural in the title. Yeah. But anyway, there's a load of Greg Boyd's done some stuff on this.
The Unseen Realm.
The Unseen Realm. Well done.
I just had to find it in my head.
Perfect. I wish you could have seen that, dear listener, that Tim was literally looking in his head. So in Genesis 1, we meet a God who, and we're doing this in the church, in the church I'm a part of. And so, oh my goodness, dude, it's going to be hard not for me to want to do some sort of Genesis thing, because I'm learning so much.
Turn the corner from the last book.
From beginning to, or from end to beginning. I don't know, because I know the church has people who listen to this. But I mean, there's so much you have to cut out. So that the fun part of doing like the podcast is we get to,
we get to 20-something, 30-something episodes.
Oh, we get to dive in. It's so great. So in Genesis chapter 1, we meet a God named Elohim. And Elohim in ancient Near Eastern literature is both a category of being and a title for the one true God of Israel. It's a plural noun, and the pluralness of the noun is the plural of majesty. This is something very common throughout the ancient Near East. When the plural noun Elohim has a singular verb, God created, it's in reference to the one true God. Or sometimes it'll say like the most high Elohim, or the highest of highest.
Elohim of the Elohim.
Yes, exactly right. In other cases, if the plural noun is followed by a plural verb, it's in reference to the lowercase gods, the other spiritual beings that populate the realm of the heavens that have authority in the biblical story. Yeah. We've talked a little bit about this, and it's absolutely fascinating. In Genesis 1, the first day, God creates time. He names light day and darkness night, and that is the realm of time. Yeah. And then on day 4, he introduces, they're called luminaries, which are refractions of light in the heavens. And these lights serve several purposes. One of the purposes is they're said to mark days and seasons and appointed festivals. So he creates the realm of time, and then he creates a way to mark time beyond day and night. And this is the words that are used to describe days and nights and appointed festivals. Those are words from like the Levitical festival calendar. So like baked into creation is the festival calendar that Israelites will, into perpetuity follow. Yeah. But he also calls these lights, he calls them signs. And the word here means symbols. And the thing that's really, really interesting is they're symbols of what? Well, on the one hand, they're symbols of light, because they are lights. In fact, the word for light is lamp, like a menorah. It's the same word that's used. But on another hand, in Genesis 2, verse 1, it says, "Thus were completed the heavens and the earth and the inhabitants of both." And there is later, and we don't have time to get into all the details, but there is later evidence that the host of heaven being referenced there are the angels, the spiritual beings in the heavens. So that the lights turn out to be the symbols of beings that actually control the movements of the stars and have authority. In fact, the thing that's so interesting in day 4 is that the sun and the moon have two purposes. They govern, and the word for rule, they govern the day and the night. And they govern the stars, and they also separate darkness from light. In Genesis, in the first day, Yahweh, Elohim, is the one that separates darkness from light. In day 4, it's these lights, these creatures that separate darkness from light, and they have authority to govern, which is interesting because then we get to day 6, and we meet creatures who are going to fill the earth below, and they have authority to govern too. So the parallelism, plus some later explicit references in the Psalms and Job, suggests that the stars stand for spiritual beings that live in this realm called the heavens. And remember, for them, the heavens wasn't some disembodied place when you died. The heavens was the sky. And they were levels of heaven. We'll read about the highest heavens or the heavens above the waters, as opposed to the heavens where the birds fly. But heavens is plural, and that's the reason. The heavens were the atmosphere and God's space. Now, all of that is to say, from the earliest moments of Genesis, we're to the ancient mind, we're being told that there is a category of spiritual being called Elohim. And we read about these spiritual beings in the book of Psalms when they're referenced as a divine council, or we meet them in Genesis 6 when we read about the sons of Elohim. But in English, we miss all of that. We think when it says stars and the moon and the sun, we are thinking flaming balls of gas and, dead planets or whatever. No, the ancients saw this as like spiritual beings. And that's why when God says, let us make humanity in our image, the plurals there aren't of majesty. They're plurals of deliberation. And so the pictures of God as a king in a throne room with a bunch of courtiers who are there to carry out the will of Elohim.
So that plural there is referring to the Elohim plural.
Yes.
We always grew up with the people were like, oh my gosh, well, look at, he's using plural language there. It's because it's the Father, the Son, and the Spirit.
Totally. And I used to think that too. And the fact that Elohim is a plural noun. Mm-hmm. I had the most marvelous 3-hour lunch with a scholar whose work is in ancient languages, Mesopotamian languages, so Akkadian, like ancient Hebrew, Sumerian, and I one of the things he was saying that I've since, I've seen, many other scholars say the same things, is that there are grammatical ways that Hebrew functions that are kind of indicating that this is a plural of majesty and this is a plural of deliberation. And what's not in view here is any Trinitarian sort of thing. The one place where, you talk about a fascinating lunch, dude. The one place he was saying that the early Christians did make a lot of hay was with the idea that there is Elohim, and then there is the Ruach of Elohim, the spirit of Elohim. And I'm not saying the word right. I'm an idiot when it comes to pronouncing Hebrew. And then you have the word of Elohim that's spoken, that activates the spirit. And so you kind of have this, at least it's nuanced. It's not Trinitarian, but it's a nuanced view where there's Elohim, the spirit of Elohim, and then some sort of creative act that involves speaking. Because remember, the Ruach is a word that means breath and wind and spirit. Yeah. And so it's just an interesting picture. All that is to say, though, even the first picture we get of the cosmos, as Gambas would call it, is one that's populated in realms. So there is the realm of the heavens, and it has its inhabitants. The realm of the earth, and it has its inhabitants. The realm of the seas, it has its inhabitants. And then the realm of the deep abyss, the grave, the pit, the Tehom, it has its inhabitants. And so we're introduced to a picture that's just more symbolically potent than God just creating a bunch of, planets in the sky. Makes sense so far?
Yeah.
So when we get to Genesis 3, verse 1, and we come across a talking snake, to the ancient reader, that would not have been an image that would have been unfamiliar. Yeah. To the ancient reader, and we don't have time to explore this, but Genesis 2 presents, both Genesis 1 and 2 present Eden as temple space where God and humanity overlap.
Yeah.
And it's up on a hill because there is a river flowing out from it and separating into 4 headwaters. And And Eden, well, boy, that will take us. Yeah, we don't need to go there. Again, I'm lost in Genesis right now. So there's so many random Genesis thoughts that are happening. But
I love it.
In Genesis 3, we read. Oh, now the serpent. Totally. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord had made. Now, okay, this is our first introduction to the dragon figure. All right, it won't become fully fleshed into the dragon figure until later. But we got to talk a little bit about this serpent because, okay, why is there a talking snake?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, great question. Really important question. And it's not just the snake is talking. We're told that the snake was crafty. Now, the word is shrewd. And it either means the snake was the most cunning of the wild animals, or the snake wasn't one of the wild animals and was something else entirely.
The shrewdness was about its identity, not about its
function, or capacity. That's right. And so the word snake is nakash, which again, I'm no Hebrew scholar and I don't know how to pronounce these things. So, but it matters because there are other words of snake that we will encounter later in the story. Now, the interesting thing about this word nakash is it's a play on the word for divination later on in the text, like to try to divine the will of the gods through some sort of device or some sort of oracle, and which is totally outlawed. So the snake, kind of the name given the snake, and there are other names, the name given the snake is a name that kind of hints at nefarious purposes already, right? Something that's outlawed. And even a snake, one of the craziest things that happens is when God curses the snake, he says, "Cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals." Okay, so is it an animal? Is it not? We're not sure. "You will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust all the days of your life." So the implication is it wasn't on its belly before. Like it was walking and talking, and it had
Evolution,
cunning
baby.
and intelligence. Yep, Pearl Jam, perfect. Yes, right? I mean, it's so weird. This is so weird. So it's shouting to us either this is unlike any of the other wild animals, or it's not a wild animal. It's all, but will be cursed to become one.
Yeah.
Right? And grammatically, it seems like it could go either direction. But the thing that happens later is, first of all, the snake is a very, very well-known image of disorder and sorcery in the ancient Near East, not surprisingly. Snakes were powerful symbols of chaos. And remember, chaos just means disorder. To the ancient world, the thing that was the goal of society and households and the universe was order. The Egyptians even had a god for order called Ma'at, or maybe it wasn't a god of order. It was just what the gods were supposed to produce was Ma'at, order. And so having things functionally in their places, is kind of what the Bible calls shalom, and it's the goal. So the snake doesn't fit in.
Which is like an anti-chaos.
Yes. So the snake became, in ancient Near East, a picture of chaos. And then if you put a snake in water, you get sort of the great beasts of the deep, like Leviathan or Rahab. Yeah. If you put a snake in the air, you get a dragon. So you have like a webbing together of all of these images. But one of the things that the snake claims for itself is that it has insider information about the purposes of Yahweh. In Genesis 2, God is called Yahweh. In Genesis 1, he's Elohim. And that's a really interesting dynamic that we can talk about some other day. But is this making sense, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Hallelujah. Because I'm off into so many different like, I have notes, but I'm so off of those that I can't even stand it. So, snakes were just potent in their imagery. They symbolized immortality because they would shed their skin and kind of be reborn. They were symbols of death because of their poisonous bite. They were symbols of the underworld because they would crawl on their bellies and go into holes. So you meet a talking snake, and that's not as weird in the ancient world as, we would think it is. But there's this thing that happens later in the biblical story where we meet different kinds of spiritual beings. Some are called cherubim, and some are called seraphim or seraphim. I'm not sure how best to pronounce that. And that there are cherubim in the garden, right? They're the ones that actually guard the way so that the humans can't get back into Eden. So they were in there to begin with. But we meet in the book of Isaiah. We meet creatures called seraph or seraphim.
I started thinking about toilet paper.
What?
And how angel soft.
Oh boy.
The cherubim always.
I don't even want to know.
As cherubs,
I don't even want to know.
The little pudgy angels that wear little diapers and have little wings, and
no, I don't.
Just what a weird image that has come from this really thick biblical text to when I go to Target to buy my toilet paper. Sorry.
That everything you just said is awful. So here's the thing. So later in the story, we get throne room visions of God, right? We just had one in Revelation, and we get pictures of the living creatures surrounding the throne. And they're different. In Ezekiel, they're different than Isaiah. Ezekiel calls them cherubim or cherubim. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. And Isaiah calls them seraphim or seraphim. And it's an untranslated Hebrew word, and that word is translated snake. So dun dun dun. So one of the images that we get in Isaiah is that there are these snake-like figures around the throne of God that have wings. Okay? And you can do research on this. I'm actually not making this up. Because the word seraph, or for singular, seraphim plural, is the word for a venomous snake. And that word is used interchangeably with the word nakash, which is the word that's used for serpent in chapter 3, verse 1. So you get like in Deuteronomy 8, it says, Yahweh led you, Israel, in the great and terrifying wilderness of the snake, the venomous snake, Hebrew seraph. Later in the book of Isaiah, the prophet describes the ruler of Babylon as a snake, Hebrew nakash, and a flying snake, Hebrew seraph. Right, as a flying snake. There is, later on in Isaiah 14, do not rejoice, O Philistia, all of you, because the rod that struck you is broken. For from the snake, nakash, from the snake root, a viper will come out, and its fruit will be a flying snake, Hebrew seraph. Okay, so what's the picture we're getting here, bro? The snake is one of the winged guardians around the throne. And the snake, so it would have been in Eden, because that's where the throne, right? It was Eden was the temple, the temple space.
Yeah.
And this snake gets cast down onto the earth. And that is exactly what Revelation 12 talks about. Yeah. There was a war in heaven, and the dragon gets cast down to the earth. So what used to be a winged angel is now, again, symbolically, like a wild animal that crawls on its belly. Do you see the symbolic power of that?
Yeah.
So what?
No, go
Show
ahead,
me your face. Going. I mean, it's so good. Your face is shouting at me. So the first image we get is, and I didn't do, I mean, I'm going to go back. I don't often re-listen to these, but if I did, I would be like, man, I could have explained this a lot better. Especially the Hebrew words. It's tough. It's tough to just do it verbally and not like have things to point out and look at text and so on. But the point I want to make is, if you were somehow able to follow all of that, the picture we're getting in Genesis 1 is of some sort of inhabitants of a heavenly realm. In Genesis 2, we meet like this temple space where Yahweh is dwelling with the humans he made. And then in chapter 3, we meet a talking snake. And who's the talking snake? Well, first of all, snakes were very potent images in the ancient Near East, so not shocking that one shows up here. But this snake seems different. This snake can talk. This snake seems to have, or claims to have, evidence of the purposes of Yahweh, right? When he says to the woman, you won't surely die, God knows you'll become like him, like an Elohim, which is
just so similar to the temptations in the desert too. Like
I mean, if we got into the temptation narratives, like the way that the woman is tempted by the spiritual being, and then the way the spiritual beings are tempted by the women in Genesis 6, the sons of Elohim they saw that they looked good and were, and they took them. That language is parallel. So the great flip is the spiritual being tempts the woman, and then the women tempt the spiritual beings, not on purpose, of course, they just existed. And so the spiritual beings in Genesis 6 violate the bounds that God had set for them. So holy moly. And that interpretation is actually backed up in the New Testament in Peter and in Jude. And so you're like, what? Is this real? Is this just symbolic? Is it real? Did this really happen? So angels can manifest as physical bodies and have sex with people? What? That, my friend.
And then their offspring die and become demons?
No, they became giants.
Though the offspring, when the Nephilim died, remember Mackie was talking about, like, there's a couple passages that suggest that the spirits of dead Nephilim are demons.
Oh, got it. Yes. Yes.
Which is a Heiser.
Yeah, if you
connection.
Yeah, when did we have that conversation with Mackie? That was a very
while
long time ago.
It was like the 200s or something.
I think we also had a conversation with Gambus on this, and then we did an episode on this before. So this shouldn't be terribly. If you've
we did. You did a whole thing on just this section. I was
I did.
Bit back, but there is a larger contextual episode on this, and then we did just do something with Gambus recently that was on powers and.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yes, we did. Look at us. Dude, after 400, how many episodes have we done? 400, what?
I don't know. 20.
I just don't remember what we've talked about or not.
I know.
You know?
Well, luckily, it's always good, like, to, even if you hit something again, it's refreshing.
Well, what percentage do you think of our listenership has listened to every episode? I mean, it's got to be,
we brought
10%?
that up and then a few people emailed in. They're like, I've been here from the beginning.
That's crazy.
We'll get new listeners who are like, hey, this was great. I just went back and started at the beginning. Like,
that's
wow.
crazy. So anyway, hopefully some of this sounds familiar, but the point is, there's a reason why it's a dragon in Genesis 12 and not some random thing, right? Because it's pictured as a flying snake. Yeah. And flying snakes are pictured throughout the Old Testament as, like, using the word seraph. So when Isaiah calls these seraphim, you're like, oh, the living creatures were flying snakes, right? And you're like, what? What in the world is going on here?
Lizard people are real.
Yes. Do you remember the miniseries?
Everyone go read the Denver airport. Anyone who doesn't know about that conspiracy can go read it about the lizard people at the Denver airport. But maybe those are seraphs.
I'm just saying.
It was real.
But the point is, when we get to a flying dragon in Revelation, and if you're Jewish, now a lot of these folks weren't and would have had this explained to them. But that motif, the flying snake kind of motif, that's where it starts. So when you get to Revelation and you are hearing about this spiritual being of great power, but is still a creature, right, of Yahweh's.
Which is so interesting.
So interesting, but somehow has volition and will. and authority to some small degree, or large, depending.
Yeah.
You're not shocked by that image. That's an image that's been building throughout the whole Old Testament. And again,
so can I ask a question about that particular thing?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the idea that the seraph, you see that used to describe serpents in other texts, in other places, like you just. Do you know if the culture of the time would have seen? So there's an understanding here that the flying dragon and that kind of stuff, or a snake moving on its belly, or all the different things that you just listed, like going into a hole and all that kind of stuff, are all negative connotations. But if a seraph was seen as a translation for a snake, are we assuming that most of this stuff is not seen as good or bad until the context of the situation is?
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? Because if they just knew that this flying dragon, this kind of stuff, that snakes were bad, then why are angelic beings associated with snakes? Does that give them a negative context from the get-go? Or does the negativity or the evil or whatever you want to call it, does that come in a different...
Yeah, good question.
Get applied to them at some point?
I don't know. This is very... This whole field of inquiry is very new. Like new in the last 2 or 3 years to me. No, it's not new academically, but to me.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure. I know one of the things that's true in Genesis is that you encounter things in seed form. They get developed like more fully. So like, for instance, in Genesis 1 verse 2, we read about the earth is formless and empty, and there's darkness over the great deep. And the great deep there is the word tehom. And there, the great deep just symbolizes like pre-creation. Like to the ancients, when you created something, it didn't mean that you brought it into material existence. It meant that you gave it a function, and you organized it. And so like, if you have a lump of Play-Doh, Americans look at that and go, yeah, that's a thing, because it has physical properties and it takes up space in the world. To the ancients, something wasn't a thing until it had a purpose and name and was organized as part of a functional system.
So some of this stuff, hypothetically, within this conversation pre-existed, but didn't have a purpose or a form completely.
Well, I'm confident in saying this. The Bible affirms God created everything. I'm just not sure Genesis 1 is the place where it affirms that.
Right.
Because the waters aren't considered a thing. Because if you read the Egyptian story or the Babylonian creation story, they both start with waters.
Yeah.
And so waters was kind of this universal symbol for nothingness out of which order came. So there, I'm giving an example of how something starts neutral, which were the deep waters, and God separates them on day 2. He introduces something called a rakia, or a vault, or the firmament. He separates water from water.
Yeah.
And introduces a realm called the skies or the heavens. What then becomes true later on in the story is this great deep. These waters become symbols of chaos.
Yeah.
And so Job or Jonah will talk about the great deep in very negative terms, but it started out as just the pre-created. This was pre-creation. This was pre-created nothingness, the undifferentiated waters. They weren't good or bad. It was a picture of nothing out of which God created something. But then they take on negative characteristics, right? So does darkness. So does tohu vavohu, wild and waste. That's an image for a desert wasteland. And they're all pictures of something that's inhospitable to human life that God then takes the first 3 days to deal with.
Yeah.
But the point that you're making is, hey, snake, Genesis obviously wasn't the first book in the Bible written. And Genesis shows a lot of familiarity with other narrative stuff. And so it's totally okay to say that Genesis is introducing motifs that get developed way later, or using later motifs to talk about things that were happening. Because obviously, where was Moses on day 1, right? Obviously, either God gave him, dictated this, or, which I don't think happened, or, right, God communicated to Moses the metaphysical truths of God's sovereignty over everything. And Moses used the symbolic universe of his world to describe that.
Which is so interesting if you think about like flat Earth, right? Not flat earthers today, but like that was our understanding of the planet with limited, capabilities of seeing.
Why would you think it's round?
Yeah, and then or that we were the center and everything kind of went around us. And it took us a while to get to a point where we realized, but we based science, understanding life, all this kind of stuff around those ideas.
Right.
So when you think about some of the stuff, it's like light and dark, day and night. It's so interesting metaphorically that when it's night here, it's day on the other side of the planet.
Right.
Like the sun doesn't turn off, obviously.
Right.
But so our understanding of things is so attached to our whatever knowledge that we have at the time.
Yes.
To be able to unpack larger truths with little
absolutely
hands.
And think about if human beings are still around in 2,000 years, how ridiculous our Big Bang theory will look, or our little theories of it. I mean, like, of course.
Talk about reading other people's mail. Oh no, you gave the example of like sports scores. Like if someone's like, "Hey, the Lakers killed." The
Black Mamba finished the Laker game.
Exactly. And then if you read that in 2,000 years, and they're like, whoa.
Who's the Black Mamba?
The 2000s were a crazy time period where they had giant snakes playing sports and eating other teams. And what does that mean? And
Or what was that? No one will know the difference between a booty call and a butt dial. Did you see that little thing floating around? So I don't have to believe that the earth rests on pillars to believe the truth of what Genesis 1 says about the earth.
Yes. And that's
absolutely
such an important
because if I were writing Genesis 1, right? If God's spirit inspired me, I would be like, man, in the beginning was God. And then God said, bang. And the universe
God's not surprised by that.
Exploded. No, that's part of what he is committed to.
But you see that in like the arguments of the time of today with interpretations of things. And it's like Moses is working from however God communicated to Moses, whether he,
visionary sleep or whatever. Yes.
Moses is still working within Moses's.
That's right.
So it's just so right. God knowing that, God deciding to use human beings as the means to tell this story and do this thing. That's right. Intentional.
Yep.
Our limitations, though, are part of that intention. So it's
exactly.
It's so fascinating in that regard. Like it's part of the narrative is our inability to articulate it.
Yeah. Oh, that's well said, Tim. That's exactly right.
I'm an English teacher. I have one other little question about something from Revelation. And this I may just be picking at something really random and means absolutely nothing. When John is given the scroll to eat, take this and eat. That's kind of language of communion also, like embodying something. Is that a connected piece in some way, or is it just a random?
I don't know. I know I think it's Ezekiel, the prophet is given a scroll that tastes sweet and then is bitter. So I think that's where that's channeling. I don't know if it's a communion, like take and eat.
Taking this larger truth and
ingesting it
as part of being part of a larger narrative.
Yeah. I mean, bro, that could be. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Listen, the thing that I am so thrilled by in general in human life is every time I think, I got it.
Totally.
You don't got it. I don't got it.
I love that. Yep.
It just keeps getting bigger. The whole thing keeps getting bigger. Well, you'd think so. And it's scary though, because, I look at what Jesus following looked like for me when I was, 23, and it looks different now. And in some ways more faithful, in some ways maybe less faithful. I don't know, depending on how you define those terms.
Faithful to what?
Yeah, totally. But the world has just gotten bigger, and God has gotten bigger and more beautiful, and
complex.
Well, that and I simultaneously feel, on the one hand, we have so much agency in the world,
and can do things,
and on the other hand, I feel I don't feel pressure to have to be Christian, right? I want to be human. And in doing that, in an allegiance to Jesus, I become Christian. Does that make sense? Like,
absolutely.
The pressure's off. I don't, my Jesus time is not measured by how often I've read my Bible or prayed. My Jesus time is configured by driving and shopping and studying and relating to my kids. And of course, Bible time and prayer time are a part of that. But it can't be reduced to that.
Yeah, well, you see that, and we've talked about this a bunch, but like the idea that we are told so often growing up that we are worthless and whatever, that we were born sinful and da-da-da-da, but that being like this disease or whatever, but that what it seems like we're called to is actually we're called to be fully human, and that's a good thing. That's not a terrible thing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
So it's like there's something to being human that is a wonderful. Oh man, I was watching an interview with Stephen Colbert and Anderson Cooper.
Oh,
did you see that one? Anderson Cooper gets choked up asking. Yes, good Lord.
If dear listener, if you've not seen this Colbert is a Catholic, but I don't know. I mean, he seems to take it very, very seriously.
Yeah.
And he lays some stuff on Anderson Cooper that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And it just really makes, and he ties in, I'll try to find it and I'll link it in the show notes, but it's a, whether you agree with it or not, it's at least provoking to think about suffering as a really key component of joy and humanity and that kind of stuff. And so as we wrestle with things like the problem of evil or whatever, I don't know, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a good theological book on water.
I have no doubt there is. I wouldn't know what it would be.
Because you just went through a bunch of things in therapy this week for me. I was talking to her about how, since we were so busy all summer and I was working on the bathroom and all those things, I didn't get into the water once. I didn't get into a pool or a lake or a river. And she was just like confounded. But then we were talking about recurring dreams that I've had my whole life, and they all deal with water. And we just had this long conversation about how important water is in relation to human beings. And there's metaphorical, spiritual, a lot of different implications that come with water.
Well, think about
and then baptism and birth. And
well, I was going to say, I mean, all the pictures of salvation, not all of them, many of them come from this idea delivered from, through, or by water.
Yeah. We talk about it in my English class with one of the short stories we read. And I just asked the students, tell me every image that you have from society or whatever about water. And we go through like baptism or what happens to a woman right before she's about to go into labor and
wow.
Cleansing and
Jaws.
Jaws.
Yeah.
Where there's the big Leviathan that comes. Leviathans. We had dinosaurs.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave it at that.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this made some sort of sense today. I really
think it
did.
It's fascinating.
Well, we're setting up. We'll talk about beasts, I think, next episode. So when we come to dragon and beasts, we have a way to talk
context.
about. Yeah. What is it we're talking about here? And so anyway, man, we're so grateful for all your feedback. Thank you for tuning in. We really. I don't know, maybe Tim, because Tim, is a very, very prideful and entitled person.
That's true.
I'm very surprised people listen to this, especially after 450 opportunities to do otherwise, or however many episodes we have. But man, we're grateful. Thanks for letting us be a part of your life. Appreciate you guys. See you.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this conversation. Voxology is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is supported by listeners just like yourself. If you'd like to partner with us, you can do so at patreon.com/Voxology. You can also join the community and hang out and chat with us on the socials. Facebook.com/Voxology Podcast and on Instagram @Voxology. Thank you for walking the long road with us.